Hey guys, Celeste from the future here to add some quick contextual notes. As many of you know, there's a genocide occurring in Palestine at the behest of the nation of Israel. That being said, since I recorded this episode, several of the cast members of Stranger Things came out in support of Israel, outing themselves as Zionists. Here at Astrophic, we do not support colonization or imperialism, and those efforts include boycotting. While I cannot reverse time to undo the creation of these episodes, I hope you can understand the simple fact that the only reason I'm posting episodes on characters from Stranger Things still is because they were already recorded. I had written episodes for most of the characters, but due to this turn of events, I will be trashing the rest of those scripts. I'll be replacing all of the Stranger Things episodes that weren't recorded yet with characters from the Hunger Games. Every Stranger Things focused episode from this point on will also have this message playing before it. Additionally, if you'd like to see how you can help the people of Palestine, please see the resources in my link tree in the show notes. From the land to the sea, Palestine will be free. And remember, we're not free until everyone is. Take care of each other. Thank you, and enjoy the episode. Welcome to Astrophic, your dose of fun, relatable astrology content where we apply astrology to fictional characters to find out why they're like that. I'm your host, Celeste V, and this week we're talking about 11, aka Jane Hopper, of the hit Netflix show Stranger Things. Now, let me level with you folks. I've been a Stranger Things fan from before the get-go, okay? I don't know how, but I found myself getting publicized production updates back when Netflix was a little less secretive about show updates. Naturally, seeing a show about a little girl with supernatural powers, I went, oh, word, and tuned in. I was on Tumblr and just getting pictures on my dashboard of the show, of like pictures of the production when they first started filming. Oh God, way back when it aired in 2016. So it had to be like 2014, 2015 when I was getting pictures, probably late 2015, if we're being honest. And I was like really into it. I don't know. You know the iconic picture of bald 11 in like the fucking hospital gown. No, not the hospital gown. The pink dress that she wore with like the little blue cardigan, right? And like her nose bleeding because she's using her powers and she's like screaming. She has her hand out. Yeah, that picture hooked me. I was sold. Loved it from the beginning and have only grown fonder of it as it has gone on and eventually reaching its conclusion. If that wasn't evident from my episode on Steve Harrington, that was practically a love letter to his character development. Anyways, all that to say, I've been rocking with Elle since the beginning, and I'm gonna rock with her till the end. I dump your ass, you know? I will have no Elle slander on this or any episode. Check-in time. This is the second episode that I'm recording today. So there's another episode that I recorded today. This past weekend. It's a Saturday. No, it's Sunday now. So last week. I recorded another episode that's like really long. I think all the episodes this season are gonna be way longer. I hope you guys are okay with that because that's just how it's gonna be. Yeah, I hear that either like long podcasts or like really short podcasts are like the way to go. So we're gonna try a more long form thing. I think it'll be fine. I talk a lot about astrology and media, so it's all good. I should be like working on some other stuff that I need to do because it's Sunday, but I want to do this. I want to record this. I don't want to do stuff that stresses me out. I want to do this. Okay, that's how I'm feeling. So now that we're all settled in, all checked in, let's get on with the episode. Okay. You guys literally cannot get mad at me for this one because I'm confining myself to canon as I always have. The only thing that I do is give a rising sign because canon very, 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 very rarely provides a birth time. Elle was canonically born in November of 1971, making her a Scorpio. So tally one off, and I gave her rising sign, and she is an Aquarius rising, Go ahead, mark another tally. I said y'all can't be mad at me. There's no way she doesn't have any Aquarius placements. She's weird. She's a weirdo, okay? Have you ever seen her without those stupid egos? I'm kidding, obviously. Love her and all of her faults and all of her little weird girl things. Love her. She's a little girl with the world on her shoulders, and she can do whatever she wants. She dump your ass, okay? Anyway, let's chat about this Aquarius rising placement some more, since I'm making such a big fuss about it or whatever. Aquarius risings are always going to stand out in a crowd. They're the eccentric ones, the weirdos, the misunderstood ones. Misunderstandings don't always have to be rooted in maliciousness, okay? For the most part, Elle is kind of a cool girl to Mike and the others upon first meeting. Also, to be fair, they are the nerds and the weirdos of their hometown, so whatever. Take it with a grain of salt. They treat her with respect and care, though, not because she's a person, but because she's strange, and they find out that she has crazy powers, and that's really cool to all these outcast boys. This placement makes up the rest of her chart and dictates where all the other placements sit. Aquarius is often dubbed the humanitarian, which means that Aquarius will always have the betterment of humanity as their ultimate desire. Elle has been through a lot, and it has inarguably shaped who she has become as a teenager. She's hell-bent on saving the world, but all of the trauma from this quest has hardened her to the same world she longs to save. Knowing what she knows, seeing what she's seen, Elle is also acutely aware of the fact that people die all of the time, and most of them die before their time. But that there are some people in the world who would better serve humanity as a corpse. As an air sign, Aquarius can seem all happy-go-lucky and ditzy, but they're a fixed sign ruled by Saturn. They can be just as cold, detached, and calculating as the other fixed signs. That outcome largely depends on other placements, of course, though. As all things in astrology, it is all dependent on how everything interlocks and interchanges and affects each other, because nothing in astrology exists in a vacuum, much like how nothing in the real world exists in a vacuum. None of us exist in a vacuum around each other. All of us are connected, and that is the point of Aquarius. Okay. Let's talk about one of those placements now, those that affect other placements. I would like to reiterate that I did not choose any placement except the rising sign. All of these placements are from her canon birth date, but because I chose the rising sign, that choice dictates what houses they all fall in. If she were a different rising sign, they would be in different houses. But her next placement is her Chiron in Aries' third house. The third house is the house of communication, thinking, siblings, and all the things nearest to you as you grow up. Chiron is an asteroid placement that shows an area of your life that you've been hurt in and one you try very hard not to hurt others in. It's like how some people are like, oh, I'll never cheat because I was cheated on and it fucked me up. But it is about more than just that kind of like behavior and trauma. I feel that this placement is so incredibly literal. When we meet Elle, she can't talk. She can't communicate. She was completely unable to speak and explain anything. Additionally, much of the reason her life turned out the way it did was because people lied to her entire life. They lied and they gaslit her and they fully made things up to placate her. Elle is very cognizant of the way that people use words now and how they choose to communicate, not just with her, but with anyone. This is why she takes it so hard and so personally when Mike never tells her he loves her in his letters. Some people were saying that she was overreacting, but when she's been lied to about being loved her entire life, of course she's going to be triggered and feel hurt and abandoned. Her response to that hurt is also like a very hurt Aries. She yells and cries, essentially throwing a tantrum. The only person who does right by her and this trauma she has is Hopper. The letter he leaves her in season 3 is by far one of the most beautiful pieces of writing I've ever had the pleasure of hearing in a show. She cherishes that letter deeply because it soothes this Chiron wound she has. He had the foresight to leave her a letter detailing specifically how much he loves her and how proud of her he is. That alone does so much to alleviate the pain that Brenner has inflicted upon her through very similar but oppositely intentioned means. Okay. You know what? Speaking of Brenna, let's keep talking about the way that Elle was raised. Her next placement is her Taurus Saturn in the 4th house. All right, you guys, another fucking tally, okay? Again, I didn't choose these placements. They are just the day that she was born, okay? 1971. This is how it was. I can't change that. The 4th house is the house of family, upbringing, your inner world and emotions, as well as how you behave when you're alone. Saturn is considered to be a malefic planet because it imposes restriction, discipline, and consequences. However, as an Aquarius rising, this placement is her chart ruler. That means all the energy in her chart begins to flow from here. That sounds weird, right? Considering I just said that Saturn is the planet of restriction. But the thing about Saturn is that it is trying to get you to build a life that will allow abundance to flow freely to you with very little effort in the long run. However, its attitude is that you must first work hard to earn it. In Taurus, there are no extra modifiers to this placement, meaning no dignities or debilities. However, because Taurus is ruled by Venus, it is definitely much more focused on comfort and luxury in the long run in exchange for discomfort and confrontation now. For Elle, as a 4th house Saturn haver, all of the most trying events occurred when she was a child. I don't feel like I need to explain any of that to y'all since we're like seeing all of it. You know, she's a lab experiment who was essentially stolen from her mother in the hospital. I will also add that Taurus is a placement that forges incredibly strong bonds that can last a lifetime and that will go out of their way to ensure those bonds are maintained. One of those bonds is, of course, the bond a child has with their mother. Elle goes out of her way to find her mother, to find some of her siblings from the Hawkins lab in season 2. She's a whole journey related to her upbringing that a majority of viewers did not enjoy or appreciate. And the last thing I'm going to say on that is if you didn't enjoy the season 2 storyline, I'm glad to hear that your relationship with your family is going well. I forgot I wrote that in the script. What was I on? I was mad. That's so funny, you guys. Okay, now we're gonna get into some wild shit. Elle's chart is interesting because with this like Aquarius rising layout, she has like 2 out of 12 of her placements in the lower half of her chart, and all of the rest of them are in the top half. Also interesting that her chart ruler is the only planet in the bottom half of the chart. Wonder what that means. Anyway, her next placement is her moon in Virgo in the 8th house. The moon is a part of what people call the big 3 placements. It rules over our inner world, our emotions, and how we both experience those emotions and express them to other people. The 8th house is a wild house to have such an important personal placement in because the 8th house is the house of like all things taboo. It's the house astrologers have dumped sex, death, rebirth, other people's fortune, and large sums of wealth into. All things that people can't really explain, but that impact us all in a very deep way. Or at least that's how I see it. Additionally, the moon can represent the mother. Virgo's symbol is the maiden or the virgin, depending on who you ask. So in this case, that would represent Elle's mother. In the 8th house, this placement denotes some themes of betrayal, which I will infer refers to when Brenner stole Elle from her mother. Otherwise, a Virgo moon denotes a true love that exists from child to mother and vice versa, but that the mother may be a bit overbearing or a bit helicopter parentish. I think this could have been true had she been able to keep Elle, but I think that we also see this in her doing everything she can to get Elle back. Ultimately, that results in a truly harrowing sacrifice, and that Elle's mother is captured and given so much ECT, known commonly as electroshock therapy, that she enters a permanent state of catatonia, essentially fully disabling her and preventing her from ever trying to take Elle back again. Okay, that's a lot about her mother, but what about Elle, or as her mother named her, Jane? Earth moons are always a tough pill to swallow. Typically, an Earth moon will have a very specific way they wish to process their emotions, and that processing usually doesn't happen until they're alone or feel completely safe, especially if it's in the 4th house, 8th house, or 12th house. Those houses all denote a feeling or even a preference for isolation. Also, since the moon is in the 8th house, I would wager that Jane feels her emotions very, very deeply, and that most emotions for her can get so big she doesn't know what to do with herself. I think this generally lends itself to a good purpose when it comes to her powers, considering her powers are generally very dependent on her emotional and mental state. When she has big outbursts of emotion, she has less control, but is also just more powerful. I think that is pretty Virgo in nature as well. Some may disagree with me, but as a mutable sign, Virgo can be capable of molding itself to any desired situation in order to facilitate the most desired outcome. To get metaphorical, I see Taurus as like the packed down earth of the world, fixed, steady, unmoving, unflinching, and simultaneously unwilling and incapable to take a new shape. Capricorn is a cardinal sign, so I definitely see it as a more versatile and more capable of building new things from itself. So I see it more as like soil that you'd use in a garden, or like, fertilizer or something like that. Virgo, on the other hand, it kind of weirdly is like mud to me. Like, sure, it can get bogged down and stuck in its ways, but if you add just a little bit of fluidity, Virgo can change its shape to be whatever you want it to be. I think Jane takes a bit of the same ideology when it comes to her emotional states. She often pushes down her feelings in favor of allowing others room to express themselves or process their own emotions. Also, I can't explain it, but something about the name Jane is Virgo to me. Like, you could also argue that it's just like an earth kind of name, or like Taurus specifically, but something about it is just giving Virgo. I don't know why. I really truly cannot explain. So that was a lot. Let's just keep it moving. Not gonna give you a break. Her next placement is her Virgo Mars, also in the 8th house. Mars is the planet of action, ambition, drive. It is anger, sometimes for anger's sake, and passion. You'll find that Mars shares some traits with Venus, but Venus can be a much deeper dive into these topics. Mars tends to be pretty quick to shift attention. That's all speaking very generally, though. So for Elle, much of her drive is directed towards the themes of the 8th house. I think the 8th house in her fictional world can encompass anything having to do with the Upside Down. I think especially because we rediscover her lab memories in season 4 and do all that. Like, something about amnesia or suppressed memories is very 8th house to me. I could see an argument for 12th house, but I don't know. It's just 8th house for me in my head. Anyway, this placement denotes a very strong and persistent work ethic applied to fixing the world. She's kind of broken in conjunction with one. Unlike him, though, she holds a lot of guilt for this act and feels responsible to fix it because she's kind of the only one who can, because he's not going to, and she's going to kill him. She's gonna kill him. Mars was like a lot more straightforward than her moon placement, so let's run right along to her next planet, which is Pluto, a generational planet. Pluto moves so slowly that I think nearly every one of the kids and teens has the same Pluto sign. However, what really matters is the house it's in. For Elle, Pluto is in its favorite house of all time, the 8th house. Pluto is the planet of like total destruction and reconstruction, death and rebirth. It's also a wealth planet, being represented by the Roman god Pluto and the Greek god Hades, both of whom rule over indescribable amounts of wealth. Pluto came into Elle's chart to really fuck shit up, and it has delivered, I think. There's not really a single portion of Elle's life that has not been traumatic. I think Pluto's influence on the moon placement could have been the catalyst for her demise being so awful. I think such an intense Pluto placement, pushing on the moon and Mars, combined with being Saturn ruled, really makes Elle's entire upbringing devoted to this one cause that is really the fault of the adults around her and their hubris. If Pluto represents things that are totally out of our influence, then Elle's entire fucking life has been structured and moved by others. She's always stuck doing what is essentially damage control for other people's mistakes. It's really not fair how her life turned out, and it's not even her fault. I understand why she's so angry and tired, because I fucking would be too. Next placement is another generational planet, Uranus in Libra 9th house. Again, with generational planets, what is most important to giving astrologers clues as to how it affects the chart is what house it's in, not the sign. The sign provides a lot of context as well, but the house is really bearing the brunt of meaningful interpretation. So for this placement, it seems to me that Elle may have a lot of change in her higher order, higher world beliefs, and belief systems, which is more or less true of her development from the first season to this latest season. I mean, I don't think season 1 Elle could have or would have wanted to kill Brenner. I think that's something that had to stew and develop in her heart before being acted upon, especially because he continuously showed that he was a fucking rat and a weasel. Despite the tumultuous and often unpredictable nature of Uranus, Libra can be rather calculated. It is the cardinal air sign, and after all, every air sign is capable of much more cunning than they're given credit for. It's like everyone forgets that air is traditionally associated with logic and the mind. I may have this observation because I'm also a tarot reader though, so I'm more dependent on elemental differences and readings with that. The ninth house is also the house of higher education, which usually means like college and stuff. However, I think it's important that Uranus is in this house for Elle, considering how horrible her high school experience is shown to be in season 4. She's had an eccentric upbringing, which has made her fall behind her peers in traditional schooling. This is obviously not her fault. She's at the mercy of Uranus, and in Libra, it could be that because she's so powerful and so capable in many different ways, the stars felt they had to handicap her somehow, you know? However, in Libra, this makes Elle acutely aware of how unfair it is to her. And I think all of that remorse and grief and righteous anger about how unfair it is bubbles up inside her until she finally fucking crushed that little girl's nose. Absolutely a buckwild moment, but also absolutely deserved. Too many people nowadays have forgotten that people just used to get their asses beat and have gotten incredibly comfortable on the internet speaking their quote-unquote truth. Elle had to make sure Angela didn't get too comfortable bullying her, and I fully support that. Violence is never the answer, except when it is. All right, that's the war aspect of Venus for sure. And this also brings us to her next placement, which we share in common. Again, I did not choose any of her placements except the Aquarius rising. Okay, I didn't. Every placement in here is the placement that every sign was in on the day that she was supposedly born. Okay? I just put it into a little birth chart creator, and that's what I did. All right? Anyways, she has her Scorpio sun in the 10th house. Yeah. Whatever. Tally. Whatever. Most of what you hear about Scorpios is true. Some of it is only half truths, though. If you want a true uncovering of Scorpios as a people, at Lauren Ash Astro on TikTok has hilarious little videos about us, which I find to be super accurate and relatable. Anyway, the thing that I feel is most overlooked with Scorpios is their ever-present need and drive for change. Not really a change in the outer world, but change in the inner world. To be human is to be in a constant state of flux, and I don't think anyone understands that better than Scorpios. It's not even really stemming from I've learned more, so now I must change to accommodate this knowledge. That's like way more of an air or earth thing. Scorpio is water. Our interchange usually stems from a place of like, I've experienced new and more things, so now I must accommodate myself for how it's changed me. I found myself doing this a lot growing up, especially because I moved around a ton. I enrolled in a new school almost every year, which meant this was a new crowd to try out a new persona on. Sometimes I wasn't even aware I was doing it, to be honest. I would just like see people I used to know and they'd be like, wow, you've changed. And I'd be like, what do you mean? And then they'd like say actual like real shit that has changed about me. And I'd be like, oh shit. Well, yeah. The thing about this, though, is that sometimes other people crave stability in a person. Like, they love knowing this is how this person is going to be in all situations. Scorpio is really good at surprising you with answers and ideas and stuff like that. Their likes and interests tend to be pretty set in stone, I think, since they're a fixed sign. There has to be some stubbornness felt somewhere, right? I think in every season, though, we see a different kind of Elle. It's not necessarily a different side of her, because I think the things she's experienced have changed her, not added or subtracted from her personality. They've just molded it a bit differently. Season 3 Elle, who we all loved, you know, I dump your ass, I've said it a million times this episode, is never going to come back. She's never going to come back. That version of her existed before Billy and Hopper died, and it's never coming back because now they are dead. And she feels that so deeply, but is unable to express what that means to her. So she has to internalize it, and that is where it has the most capacity to change her. Whoever Elle is in season 5 is going to be different, because Hopper's alive and Brenner isn't just dead, but she killed him, so now she knows he's dead for good this time. And because Max is in a coma, and because Mike and her are on the rocks, and because like Joyce has Hopper back, like there's so, you know, it's also a bunch of the other like crazy and scary shit that happened in season 4. All of that has changed her as a person. And we will see how it has changed her in season 5, I think. And even though it picks up right where season 4 left off, I think we're going to see that in the way that she's written and the way that she chooses to act in season 5. Like how she chooses to go about defeating one. I think another thing about this placement that can sometimes be really hard is that sometimes this change is very outward. With the 10th house influence, people can really see this metamorphosis happening within you, and sometimes they don't understand it and they don't like it. I think Joyce is especially very cognizant of those kinds of changes in Elle, because she's like the only other woman in Elle's life, so she has like, you know, more awareness of emotional states and changes. And that's why she was like capable of recognizing, not just because she's like their mothers, you know, but she was capable of recognizing that the will that she had was not her son, you know, when he was like mind flayed or whatever. Anyways, in the same area of vibes, Elle also has her Mercury in Scorpio 10th house. Again, this is a placement we share, market tally, whatever. The thing about a fixed Mercury, though, is that they're never going to talk about shit that they don't want to talk about. There's also something about a Scorpio Mercury that gives off like repressed vibes. In some way, Scorpio Mercuries are held back from speaking their truth for a long time. Whether that's because they're incapable like Elle, or because no one will listen is dependent on each person. We know Elle was just fully incapable for a while, but in the 10th house, Mercury denotes a really huge need and reward for speaking one's mind. Elle could save the world, if only she could explain to others that the world needs saving without sounding crazy. She could change everybody's mind about her and her powers and everything she's seen, if only she had the vocabulary to express her thoughts and experiences. Additionally, she is being pressured by the literal government to keep silent, lest they kill her and her entire family. So even if she had the abilities to communicate her innermost thoughts and feelings and experiences, she is literally not allowed to for fear of retribution. That's crazy. Since there's no other placement in her chart that has a communicative nature, this Mercury placement is unsupported and undervalued. That's why she's still struggling with reading, writing, and speaking even now in high school. Additionally, I think this plays a role in her fight with Mike over his letters in season 4. As I said earlier, she knows Mike is not repressed as her in terms of language. They both know what the word love means, and they've expressed it to each other before. So not receiving the same love from him that she had before is probably very triggering. Scorpio is also known for being an incredibly deep and passionate sign. So when she is not receiving that same passion from Mike that she is expressing, things probably feel a lot more uneven in terms of effort and consideration. Okay, let's move on to a much more fun placement. Astrology girlies will note that there are 2 major planets that have yet to be talked about, so let's talk about them. Elle has her Venus in Sagittarius 11th house. I love this for her, and I think it's why she and Max get along so well and why she felt so empowered by Max's advice about relationships in season 3. The infamous "I dump your ass" simply would not have been uttered had she been like a Libra or Scorpio Venus instead of Sagittarius. People often cite Sagittarius Venus as being spontaneous and adventurous, and while that's not untrue, I think that there's more nuance to this. Sagittarius is the mutable fire sign. It's as adaptive as it can be explosive. And with a restrictive mercurial influence, Elle has a hard time communicating issues in her relationships before she blows up. Additionally, this placement is in her 11th house of community, social groups, and friendships. I actually find this placement of hers to be tremendously important. A lot of her drive and motivation for saving the world exists in this house, which we'll talk about more with the next placement, but I think it's important to talk about because historically, Elle has been very quick to come to her friend's defense when they need her. Season 1, she nearly kills a kid by throwing him off the side of the cliff. Season 2, she's protecting her lab sister through any means necessary and aiding in their criminal activities. She blows up several cars. Season 3, she was less able to help because of the damage to her leg, but she tried her damnedest and it was very clearly weighing on her that she couldn't help more. Then season 4, the most heavily debated and controversial part of the season, Elle reviving Max. That entire scene is so heartbreaking, and I think you can really feel the grief from Elle and Lucas phenomenal actors. Of course, Elle loves Max, they're best friends, but I think Elle seeing Lucas's grief is another major contributor to Elle having enough willpower to do something as grand as revival, especially not being the same room as Max. If she only had her internal motivations, I don't know that she would have had the power necessary to revive Max. However, the external motivating factor of Lucas's grief and the idea of everyone else's grief later being just as intense as Lucas's lent to Elle the emotional energy to be able to perform this task. As we know, her powers tend to be very emotionally and mentally based. So those are all very specific examples of her devotion to her community, but I think her devotion can also be expanded upon because in this same house and sign she has Jupiter. Jupiter rules over the signs Sagittarius and Pisces in traditional astrology, so this is a really wonderful placement. It's in domicile. I also found that Sagittarius meshes pretty well with the themes of the 11th house. Every Sagittarius I know has always been a really great friend to me, which I deeply appreciate. Jupiter in Sagittarius 11th house kind of gives me like the friend to the world vibes, and with Venus here, also protector of the world because of Venus's war aspect. I think that her lesson in regards to this house is that she had to learn how to let people in and trust them and reciprocate their affection before she could feel capable of taking on the extreme threats that face her community. Jupiter is the planet of expansion, so it takes all of those same themes present with Venus and expands upon them, stretching them out to apply to more than just her inner circle. With such a heavy presence in her 11th house, there's a lot of direction and emphasis on the themes in this house. God, yeah, I feel like if I did an episode on one, he would have a pretty big Sagittarius influence as well. But I think it can manifest differently depending on the person, because one of the major qualms people have with Sagittarius is their unflinching honesty. That's not necessarily a character flaw by itself. It's when they truly do not give a fuck about others' feelings and situations or circumstances that it becomes trepidatious. But Elle obviously cares about others, especially because there had been so little care towards her the first decade of her life. In some roundabout way, that brings us to our last placement in Elle's chart, Neptune in Sagittarius 11th house. I find Neptune in 11th house to be so interesting because I think it's a placement that lives in the future. Not just any future either, like the idealized one. Neptune is all about dreams and the spiritual and the collective unconscious. It's otherworldly in a way, but doesn't intend to leave people behind with its forward thinking. Additionally, it is this placement that I think fuels Elle's powers in a big way. Neptune loves to imagine what's impossible as being possible, and I think there are a lot of things that Elle has done with her powers that the scientists who created her would think were impossible. And the thing about those moments where she achieves the impossible is that it is rarely, if ever, used to be of direct benefit to herself. Most of the time, these impossible tasks are intended to save someone else, or rather a group of people. And while Sagittarius is not as quick to the jump as Aries can be, all fire signs can be considered trailblazers in my opinion. Aries has the mindset of if you're not first, you're last, but Sagittarius doesn't care about being first. It cares about mutual benefits. It wants the future it envisions to be beneficial to all, not just themselves. And with that, we've reached the end of the episode. Please leave a rating on all of your podcatchers. And if you're listening to this on Apple Podcasts, it would mean the world to me if you'd leave a review. As a reminder, you can find everything related to Astrophic and me in the link tree in the show notes, including my Etsy shop where I sell tarot readings if you're interested. And if you have something you'd really like to add to the conversation, I'd love it if you left a voice note and answered the Q&As. The voice notes are allotted for about a minute of recording time, and who knows, maybe I'll talk about your note and include it in a future episode. You've been listening to Astrophic, your favorite astrology podcast, hosted by me, Celeste V. Don't forget to leave a rating and review. Thank you. Love you. Bye.